Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Wednesday. It's Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Hope you're having a great Wednesday, middle of the week, and summer is moving along, and I do hope it's going well for you. You know, it's kind of funny. I love the way things work out, and I don't think there is such a thing as a coincidence. So yesterday, in the second hour of the program, on the EWTN Radio Extra channel, I was talking about, in my 2 cents segment, St. Bonaventure, or Bonaventura, as we would say in Italian, who is closely associated because of his birth and the work that he did in the beautiful central Italy town of the Civita Bagnoregio. And it's such a magical place. And I actually sent out a blog yesterday. If you're interested, you can sign up for it on my website at teresatomeo.com, talking about St. Bonaventure, talking about the beauty of that area. I am going to talk about La Dolce Far Niente at the bottom of the hour in Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. But it was interesting because I was really focusing on this town and what it meant to me. And I played the segment in the Saints series that we did for EWTN Learn about Bagnoregio. It's known as the dying city because the land on which it sits, the mountain on which it sits, is literally crumbling, the type of soil that is there. So it's getting smaller and smaller just a little bit year by year. And that's why it's called the dying city. It's also called the floating city because when there are clouds or a little bit of fog, it's just absolutely magnificent because it looks like it's floating among the clouds. So anyhow, I have this calendar on my desk in my home studio here in southeastern Michigan, and the same one back in my home studio in Italy. And I go to tear off this morning for July 16th, and it's the Civita di Bagnoregio. I just thought that was kind of cool. I wanted to share it with you. I love stuff like that. All right. Anyhow, coming up on the program today, I'm so honored and excited. Dr. George Weigel is going to be joining us. Pomp and Circumstance is his latest book, and he takes a look at years of commencement addresses. Of course, a lot of folks went to various graduations the last couple of months, May and June, with their maybe kids or grandkids, and he takes a look at the importance of these addresses and what has happened to them over the years. Looking forward to that. George joining us at 16 minutes past the hour. And then Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, as I mentioned, we'll talk about Dolce Far Niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, and why that is so important. I just had 3 conversations yesterday with 3 clients from Tees, Italy. Wonderful people, but several of them were packing in way too much in their schedule. And they asked me, do you think we're doing too much? And I said, yes, you are. And tried to explain the concept of doing nothing and what that means Italian style. And speaking of Italian style, our very own Joan Lewis will be joining us at 39 minutes past the hour. Lots of papal news, especially from the beautiful town of Castel Gandolfo, south of Rome. And she'll join us. Looking forward to that. And we're also going to discuss, if we have time, I hope, the situation with tickets or lack thereof for the canonization. I don't know if you heard the stories that we had in the news links earlier this week, but they're not giving out tickets for the canonization, which to me is very problematic because then it's just going to be people just showing up and trying to get in. And that means you're going to have to either, because this is, I believe, going to be a very popular event, given that you've got Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis, 2 dynamic young men who mean so much to so many people, especially young people around the world. So it's going to be tough. You're going to have to get there very early, and I imagine some people, and this has been done before, will even be camping out overnight. So it's going to be very interesting. We'll discuss with Joan Lewis. So that is the first hour of the program, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the second hour of Catholic Connection as we get closer. Do want to check the weather for you, though, right now on a Wednesday morning. National Weather Service says we still have widespread showers and thunderstorms, some severe, that may produce heavy downpours and flash flooding across much of the eastern and central U.S. And we have dangerous heat continuing in the northern part of the country, specifically the Pacific Northwest, and expanding across portions of the east. Deep tropical moisture and associated thunderstorms, the National Weather Service says, bringing heavy rainfall and localized flash flooding across portions of Florida into the central Gulf Coast. So that's a look at our rundown and also the weather here on a Wednesday morning on EWTN. We are so grateful that you're listening. Right now, though, there's a lot of news, so we need to get to it right now here on EWTN. Let's get started. Joan Lewis will have much more to say about the Pope's schedule in Castel Gandolfo. Even though he is relaxing in that beautiful area, he's also keeping busy. He highlighted the urgency of coming together for peace and the importance of promoting unity through sports, politics, music, and more. Vatican News reporting in a video message published yesterday, the Holy Father addressing the participants in a charity match organized by the Holy See's Children's Hospital, Bambino Gesù, and the Italian Caritas. He said, "Our humanity is at stake. Let this match that speaks of peace mark a point in its favor." In the message, the Pope also expressed his hope that all who take part in the event may look into the eyes of children and learn from them how to find the courage to welcome others, how to be men and women that promote encounter, and how to find the strength to believe and to ask that a truce may come, a time to stop the build-up to hatred. He said it's still possible, it's always possible, he added, to come together even in a time of division, falling bombs, and war. He said it's necessary to create the opportunities to do this, saying challenge divisions and recognize the greatest challenge is to come together. A federal appeals court is upholding West Virginia's near-total abortion ban. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling yesterday the state's Unborn Child Protection Act can remain in effect. The case focusing on whether federal regulations for the abortion drug mifepristone override state law. Republican Governor Patrick Morrisey praising that decision, calling it a big win for the state's pro-life efforts. President Trump says, as Mark Mayfield explains, he's not done with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The president told the BBC he's disappointed, but left the door open for talks after he threatened Moscow with sanctions over its war with Ukraine. Trump's remarks also follow his announcement of a deal with NATO to send more weapons, including Patriot missile systems, to Ukraine. Russia has continued its military strikes in recent weeks, prompting Trump to increase his public criticism of the Kremlin. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, the president says the U.S. is destined to be the world's #1 superpower in artificial intelligence. He spoke at the inaugural Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit yesterday.
This is a really triumphant day for the people of the Commonwealth and for the United States of America.
The event brought together some of the top leaders and investors in energy and AI. The president also announcing $90 billion worth of private investments in AI and energy in the state of Pennsylvania. He said the state is retaking its place in the forefront of energy. Meanwhile, Tammy Trujillo tells us the president's DOGE-related spending cuts bill has cleared a hurdle in the Senate.
Vice President Vance on Tuesday night broke a tie to allow the Senate to begin debate on the bill, which is attempting to take back spending that's already been approved. The House approved the billions of dollars in cuts by a narrow vote in June. The over $9 billion in reductions targets mostly foreign aid, but also funding for public broadcasting. Senators expect a marathon voting session on potential changes to the bill in the next few days, as leaders hope to pass it ahead of Friday's deadline. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Jewish organizations in Northern California raising concerns about attacks on people simply because they are Jewish.
These aren't just isolated events. They're part of a wave of intimidation that's left people scared to walk down the street wearing a Star of David or to host a public event. And many of these acts are tied, sometimes explicitly, to global events.
That's Julie Mates with the Jewish Community Relations Council referencing the war between Israel and Hamas, and she says anti-Semitic incidents are driving important discussions about the safety of the Jewish community. Last year, for example, she says the Anti-Defamation League reported a record of over 9,300 anti-Semitic incidents nationwide, California seeing over 1,300. A new poll shows New York City's mayor race is very close. A HarrisX survey showing Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani getting 26% support, with independent candidate former Governor Andrew Cuomo with 23%. Republican candidate Curtis Lewa gets 22%, and Mayor Eric Adams comes in a distant fourth place at 13%. In a hypothetical one-on-one contest, a poll shows Cuomo actually beating Mamdani by 15 points. That poll was conducted last week prior to Cuomo announcing he would be campaigning as an independent after his loss in the Democratic primary to Mamdani. And President Trump continues to weigh in on the New York City mayor's race. He said he thinks that the former Governor Cuomo has a good shot at beating the Democratic nominee. His comments again come right after Cuomo this week did announce he will keep campaigning as an independent after losing the Democratic primary to Mamdani. California lawmakers in the Assembly Public Safety Committee are voting on a bill that would ban officers from covering their faces during enforcement operations. California State Assemblyman Juan Alanis is not a fan of that bill.
Turning our trusted law enforcement agencies into criminals just for wearing a mask or covering themselves to protect their families and themselves is not the answer. And so I will not be supporting this, Senator. I apologize.
The bill, introduced amid clashes over immigration raids in Los Angeles, applies to all law enforcement with the exceptions for undercover work, SWAT, and protection from smoke or gas. The vote is currently on call to allow more deliberation. The Dragon Bravo fire at the Grand Canyon is spreading. It's now burned more than 8,500 acres with 0% containment and has destroyed the historic Grand Canyon Lodge. A combination of hot temperatures, low humidity, and strong winds have made it tough for fire crews there. The north rim of Grand Canyon National Park will remain closed for the rest of the 2025 season due to the fire. Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego of Arizona have asked the federal government for answers concerning the spread of the fire. Authorities in California have taken 21 children from a couple. This woman in Texas says she carried and gave birth to a child for the couple.
The FBI, me and some of the other girls that I'm talking to are currently working with them. I completed like a 3-hour interview with them a couple weeks ago.
On Tuesday, the Arcadia Police Department confirming the children, all born via surrogate mothers, were placed in protective custody. Investigators say it's connected with a child abuse case involving a 2-month-old baby with a traumatic head injury. A man and a woman who lived at a home with the children were arrested for felony child endangerment, but have since been released. Police say the suspects were the kids' legal guardians. Investigators are also looking for a nanny who was the main suspect in the child abuse case. Scott Pringle tells us many residents are still cleaning out in parts of New Jersey and Westchester County from severe flash flooding.
Many basements and first floors got water from the flooding, and roads have been left caked in mud and have stranded vehicles. In North Plainfield, this guy was there when a house exploded Monday night.
The house just jumped up. Everything the roof flew off.
Authorities say 2 women died when their vehicle got swept away and into a brook in Plainfield. Some places in Middlesex, Union, and Somerset counties got rain. Meanwhile, a flash flood watch in effect late this afternoon for parts of central and northern New Jersey. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
A House hearing on the future of weather forecasting kicking off today, with tensions likely to rise over recent deadly flash flooding in Texas. While the session is supposed to focus on how technology can improve forecasts and save lives, some Democrats are questioning whether cuts to the National Weather Service may have weakened early warning systems. A Texas state climatologist is among those scheduled to testify. And several people recovering after an apparent stampede onto an escalator following a Beyoncé concert at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta Monday night. Devon Ramsey said he was on a platform near the station when he heard someone screaming, causing people to rush an escalator nearby that suddenly sped up and then stopped.
There was a lady laying on the ground with her young daughter, an older lady that had to prop her leg up on the bench. There were a lot of people that needed assistance after that.
8 of the injured were taken to a local hospital in the Atlanta area, many of them with cuts and scrapes. One was treated for a broken ankle. It is believed the person who screamed, apparently setting off the frenzy, might have been startled by an insect. The escalator's manufacturer, Schindler, says the cause of the incident is unclear and that it is assisting in the investigation. When we come back, we will speak to the one, the only George Weigel, his latest book all about commencement speeches and how they've changed over the years and what we can learn from them. We'll take a look at that coming up. Always an honor to catch up with George Weigel. You know him well from his great work for the church and for the culture. Prominent author and political analyst known for his contributions to the fields of theology and public policy. Authoring many, many books, well over 24, but who's counting, including a best-selling biography, of course, of Pope St. John Paul II, Witness to Hope in the End and the Beginning. And his works, of course, often address the intersection of religion and culture, advocating for reform public policy guided by moral reasoning. There's a concept for us. George, great to catch up with you. Happy summer. And you are again in the beautiful city of Krakow. We find you there. Good afternoon. Tell us why you're there, and great to catch up with you again.
Thanks, Teresa. It's always good to talk to you. For over 30 years now, I have been part of a 3-week crash course in Catholic social doctrine here, involving graduate students from Central and Eastern Europe and North America. We like to think of it as boot camp for the culture wars. It's the Quantico of Catholic summer programs, and over 1,000 really fine young adults have come through this program over the past 3 decades and are now taking very important positions in the church, society, and culture. So I'm here every July.
Wow.
And it's
beautiful.
a great privilege to be in John Paul II City for a month every year.
Oh, I've been to Poland several times. It's beautiful, and I love Krakow. It's actually a gorgeous city. All right, so your latest book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice, recently, of course, published by our friends at Ignatius Press. Why a book, George, on commencement addresses?
Well, Teresa, as you know, the book is a collection of both commencement addresses and lectures I've given in university settings around the world, North America, Latin America, Europe, Ukraine, and higher education in the Western world today is in something of a mess, as we all know. And I believe that Catholic institutions of higher learning, when they really are Catholic in their curriculum and their mode of life on campus, can create a model for the reform of the university, which, after all, is an invention of the Catholic Church in the 13th century. Mm-hmm. So that's why the book.
In terms of the importance of commencement addresses, I graduated out of college a long time. I graduated journalism school in 1981. I can't even remember, hence I think the importance of your book and what you do with these addresses and this collection of them. I can't remember my commencement address. It wasn't very moving to me. And I think this is a real opportunity, is it not, given where we are in our culture, to talk to young people before they really step out into the world.
Someone asked me the other day, why is a commencement address called a commencement address when it's at the end of something? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's because it's the beginning of real life, in a sense. You leave academic life for the world of the professions, the world of business, family, religious vocation, whatever. And I like, in these commencement addresses I've been privileged to give, to challenge young people to be the missionary disciples that they were commissioned to be on the day of their baptism. They are, I hope, going to live their Catholicism not as a lifestyle choice, but as the central focus of their lives, personally, professionally. And that leads to a life of great adventure. And I try to illustrate that sometimes with the lives of great people like St. John Paul II.
Yeah. You talk in a recent interview that you did, it was published in June on Catholic World Report, regarding the possession of truths known from both revelation of reason and how we've lost that in so many ways. And I think it's so important to get back to that. I think we're starting in some ways that the pendulum is starting to swing in the other direction, where things are really being revealed and people are coming forward and admitting the truth, for example, about the whole transgender craziness and ideology and other issues. But we still have so far to go, don't we?
In the preface to this book, Teresa, I quote the inaugural address of a former president of Harvard University, Drew Faust, who said that truth is no longer a possession, it's an aspiration. Well, if you follow the illogic of that out, you get exactly what's been happening on Harvard's campus and Columbia's campus and other so-called elite campuses in recent years, which is a bunch of little overprivileged snowflakes chanting genocidal anti-Semitic slogans in the name of academic freedom. In other words, you get total chaos. So the recovery of the conviction that there are truths built into the world and into us, that we can know these by reason, and Catholics would say also by revelation, is essential to the reformation of higher education and also the rebuilding of a culture that makes democratic self-governance possible.
Mm. What is the reaction of the folks that you're meeting with in Krakow in terms of our culture? What are they looking forward to do? What's on their hearts, and how do you think your latest book can help them?
Well, these are young adults. These are people in their mid to late 20s. And I would say over the 30 years we've done this, I have seen a big change in that the young people we work with are now frightened. How do I make a good marriage? How do I raise a family? How do I function as a consecrated religious or a priest in this cultural mess? So we've actually changed the curriculum of the seminar over 30 years. I bring Mary Eberstadt, for example, over here every year for a series of lectures to talk about, the damage done by the sexual revolution, how to talk about hot button issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I hope my own lecturing on how to be a missionary disciple helps these young people address those questions. But those were not the questions 30 years ago. And they are the questions today. And I hope some of the material in this collection of commencement addresses and university lectures also helps address those very, very real concerns of serious Catholic young adults today.
You often go back, and of course there's so many reasons as to why, but I'd like you to just mention this to our listeners because I think it's super important. And I do this for my own comfort and my own affirmation in the faith. The teachings for me of Pope St. John Paul II on women, Mulieris Dignitatem, I go back to that. I go back to the papal letter to women, and I tell other women to read it because it's just so brilliant in terms of the dignity in the human person, how we're made in the image and likeness of God. But you will always go back to, not always, but quite often go back to Veritas Splendor. Why is that so important, do you think?
Because unless we are convinced that certain things in life are just off the board morally, that no combination of intentions and consequences can ever make the killing of the innocent, sexual assault, the torture of children, et cetera, right, then we drain the drama from the moral life. And this notion that there are no intrinsically evil acts, that everything is a calculus of intentions and consequences, which was one of the reasons why Veritatis Splendor was written, was to correct that false notion, is now back after the last dozen years or so in the Church. And it's one of the challenges facing the new pontificate. We have got to get back to this idea that some things are just off the board, period, and that to deny that is to degrade the human person, and, as I say, empty the moral life of all of its drama.
Are you optimistic with the new pontificate? I know we want to have you back on as we follow things. It's obviously very new and very fresh since he was just elected, Pope Leo, in May. But any thoughts as we wrap up this morning on that, George?
Yeah, I thought it was terrific, Teresa, on something you and I have talked about a lot, that in his address to the diplomats accredited to the Holy See, just a few days after his election, he talked about the family as the first unit of society, and then went on to define the family as father, mother, and children. Now, it's a little crazy that we have to celebrate
a pope saying that.
Said,
exactly.
But, we do have to celebrate it, and it was great that he said it. And I think he understands that the crisis of our time is a crisis in the idea of the human person.
All right, George, we have to have you back on. I know you're busy. Please let us know when you're back in the States and we can spend more time on this book, your other books, and all the great work you're doing. Our friend George Weigel, his latest book, Pomp, Circumstance, and Unsolicited Advice from Ignatius Press. Of course, we'll also have it on the EWTN Religious Catalog. We'll be right back. This bumper music. It just makes me happy. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Wednesday morning, July 16th, and that music means that we are going to Bella Italia, the boot. So tomorrow we're going to go to Bella Italia too, and also after this interview, because tomorrow the one, the only Dr. Matthew Bunson is going to be with us, and we are going to be talking. I'm so excited. So excited. I hope you can join us. Dr. Bunson and I are doing our first pilgrimage together, and it's going to be next October. And we do have it posted on my website, teresatomio.com, and also Facebook and all that good stuff. It'll be under the event section. But we are going to do La Dolce Vita Fide, which is the sweetness of faith. And we are going to be, the subtitle is, walking in the footsteps of the popes. So you know the amazing knowledge that Dr. Bunson has as a church historian, a PhD, someone who has, I think, contributed to and written close to 50 books, and he's going to be joining us along with his beautiful wife, Bonnie, and Deacon Dom and I will be with you as well, and we are going to be following the footsteps of the popes, and we are going to be going to, of course, Rome, Castel Gandolfo. We are also going to be going to Arezzo in Tuscany, which is a beautiful, beautiful medieval Tuscan town. And we are going to be spending time in Viterbo, the city of the popes, and also Orvieto, the home of the Eucharistic miracle. And we're also going to be joined by a very dynamic spiritual director who's extremely knowledgeable and very familiar to our EWTN listeners and viewers. But I will let Matthew make that announcement tomorrow because he's the one who was able to recruit this wonderful priest who will be joining us. So it's very exciting news. But again, more details to come tomorrow. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was something that I really stress. And I think in the summertime, this is an easy way to take part in this. And il dolce far niente means the sweetness of doing nothing. And I'm always talking about this because the pace of life in Italy, especially where we reside half the year, is so different than it is in the United States. And unfortunately, I think many of us, myself included, and it's taken us, and we're still working at this, my husband and I, it's taken us years to adjust to the slower, the more peaceful, the come si, come sa attitude of life in Italy. Even in the bigger cities that tend to be busier, Milan is a lot like New York, I have to say. In northern Italy, it's more industrial. There's a lot going on. But even in Milan and places like Rome or Florence, they always take time to have their aperitivo, which is their afternoon cocktail, or maybe even sit down for an afternoon espresso or, some sparkling water, something just to sit at the end of the day. And the phrase aperitivo, actually, we would call it, and by the way, I have information on that on my website, Travel Italy Expert, regarding the Italian happy hour. It's an Italian happy hour, basically. But it's not just going to get a discount on a drink or maybe a glass of wine or a bottle of beer or a mocktail, whatever. It is the opportunity, really, to slow down and to make sure that you're regrouping and then opening yourself up to the mealtime. That's actually where the name comes from. Aperto in Italian means open. And so when you have the aperitivo, you're opening yourself up and getting yourself ready, preparing the palate, preparing your mind, actually slowing your body down to enjoy the meal, the cena, or the dinner. And it's a tradition in Italy, and it really is part of that dolce far niente attitude of the sweetness of doing nothing. And I do believe that that is actually very, very Catholic in so many ways. It just reminds me so much of Our Lady. We're always seeing in Scripture Our Lady is pondering. I built a whole talk around that, actually, about Mary's pondering and how we need to be more like her. Taking time to ponder and to be aware of your surroundings. And that's what Deacon Dom and I did in Bagno Reggio, the Civita, back in June. We've been there many times. This adorable, crazy, beautiful town sticking up on the top of this hill. It's just so majestic, it looks fake. And as I mentioned, it is in my Saints in Italy series. But we decided to stay overnight there just to give ourselves a break. Now that we're kind of settled and we like to go different places, and being in central Italy, you're really very close to major, major sites. And it's just really great to be able to slow down and take in the scenery. So we had the opportunity to get a hotel room in Bagno Reggio, which we've never done before. And we said, let's see if we can find a room with a little balcony. Well, let me tell you, I was expecting it to be really expensive because Bagno Reggio, the Civita, is so beautiful. But it was it was cheap. I think it was €130. And this room had 2 big balconies, a huge, huge bedroom, a little kitchenette. I mean, it was dirt cheap. You're always trying to find bargains and whatnot, but I couldn't believe the price. Anyhow, we actually sat out on that balcony for probably 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon. And it was just so, I think, refreshing. And I really just wanted to remind people, as I'm saying in this video, we're going to play this video as we wrap up, the importance and what it means to really embrace the art of doing nothing. So we're going to roll this video. I hope we have time for the whole thing. Of course, it's radio is theater of the mind. But just to give you a sense of life in Italy, things that we should embrace, the sweetness of doing nothing. Take a listen.
Ciao amici from northern Lazio, and we are wrapping up a beautiful day and evening in a charming, just really magical town known as Civita Bagno Reggio. It's also known sometimes as the floating city because of the way it sits so high on a very, very small mountain. And we're really trying to practice il dolce far niente. I talk about that all the time. I talk about it in my books. We talk about it on pilgrimage with our pilgrims, but it's one thing to say it, another thing to do it. Well, I'll tell you what, we really were able to practice il dolce far niente yesterday. We have a room with, as you can see, a balcony, actually 2 balconies, and we even had lawn chairs. And yesterday, after we confirmed our reservations in this lovely town at a wonderful restaurant, we came back to our room and simply did il dolce far niente and learned more about the sweetness of doing nothing. And this is what you really need to do when you come to Italy. As I say in my book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Italy is meant to be savored. Look at this countryside. We are in the early time of summer, early June, actually not officially summer yet, but it's summer here in terms of the temperature. Everything is in full bloom. The greenery, the yellow and pink flowers that are all over this town, the potted plants. And we'll have more pictures, of course, on Facebook of the Civita Bagno Reggio. But literally, we just sat here for hours yesterday. We talked, we laughed, we had some wine, and we really practiced il dolce far niente. And as Christians, we need to do that. We need that time, again, to be like our Blessed Mother and to reflect and to ponder, to think about the sweetness of doing nothing, which, as I always say, is really doing something. And you could do this in your own backyard. You could do this in a park by your house. But when you're in Italy, you really need to take in the beauty. I mean, look at this. This is why the Italians always talk about il dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. Ciao from the Civita in northern Lazio.
Ciao. We'll be right back on a Wednesday. Continuing our conversation on Italy, we go further south. We were in northern Lazio at the Civita. And now we are in Rome with our sister Joan Lewis. How are things in the Eternal City, my dear? How are you?
Well, the Eternal City is kind of quiet as people leave town, mainly, obviously, the Italians and residents. And tourists always coming and going, but the Italians, if they have a home at the seaside or in the mountains, that's where they're going to be spending weekends or perhaps even a month, and come back and forth to Rome to work. So it's kind of quiet. You can get a seat on a bus and maybe even a table at your favorite restaurant if the crowds aren't too big. So it's good. But I can tell you that a lot of people do go to Castel Gandolfo. I was there last Thursday.
How'd that go? Yeah.
Oh, that was absolutely wonderful. We just went for the day. And it was just to get a sense. It wasn't to tour the palace, or the gardens. I had done all of that stuff. They hadn't. But they just wanted to get away from the heat of Rome and just experience, get a little sense of this peaceful, small, beautiful town, overlooking Lake Albano. So just walking around, looking at stores, talking to store owners, and, having a nice lunch overlooking the lake. It was just totally wonderfully peaceful, what I knew it would be, and I think what Barry and Margaret expected it to be. So I actually thought of going back this weekend, or even in August when he's there, the 15th, 16th, and 17th, Pope Leo. I could not get a room anywhere. So
wow.
I tried 5-star hotels, I tried B&Bs, and no rooms available. So even, as I say, a month from now, in Ferragosto, the big vacation time of the year for every living Italian. So, because the Pope will be going, he's scheduled to come home this Sunday afternoon. He's going to have Mass at Lake Albano and then do the Angelus at Castel Gandolfo. But I read on one journalist made the remark on our WhatsApp site that is trying to get confirmation. Is it true the Pope will be coming back on the 22nd instead of the 20th? So I don't know why that would be. But I haven't had any confirmation from the press office. So we shall see if he's going back Sunday as usual.
Yeah.
But he's had a busy time, and I sent you a link from an amazing article in the Il Messaggero, is a Rome newspaper, and they put out an article that was obviously in Italian in the original. It's a long talk with Father Alejandro Moral, who heads the Augustinian order that the Pope goes to, and he revealed some absolutely amazing things about this. This was done before the Leo went to Castel Gandolfo, and the head of the order, Father Moral, said he was absolutely delighted to know that the Pope would be out there. He seems a bit thinner. He needs some rest. He works hard, etc. But talking about him being there, two things that I did not know. One is that the Pope plays the piano. He mentioned that the Pope was.
Of course he does. Why it doesn't surprise me?
Exactly. What a dumb,
Yeah.
We should know by now. Sports, the piano. He's a canon lawyer. He's a mathematician. I mean, what else? Which is just so magnificent. It really warms the cockles of your heart. But so I read that he had played a piano. So he must have one, I'm guessing, in his apartment. But a few days after his election, says this article, Leo received a famous Italian orchestra conductor, and the Pope played a not easy piece by Bela Bartok on the piano.
Wow.
So I'm guessing that the Apostolic Palace, well, it probably had a piano anyway for Benedict, so who knows if our Holy Father Leo might not have a piano. And then that he played tennis. He played tennis, as a matter of fact, the very day before he was elected. There's a tennis court. I could probably, if I could get there, I could probably walk there in 5 minutes, because where the Augustinians live and where Pope Leo lived as head of the Augustinians for so many years, they do have a tennis court. So he and the head of the Augustinians and also his secretary, Father Edgar, they have played tennis, not as often as he'd like, but the Holy Father did say Sunday, oh my gosh, this was so wonderful, Teresa. When he was there on Sunday, of course, there was Mass at the church and then the Angelus afterwards, and Pope met a lot of different people. But after the Mass, after the Mass, the Pope walked just a couple yards to the main entrance of the Apostolic Palace, which is on the main square of Castel Gandolfo, and he stood on a red carpet flanked by Swiss guards, recited the Angelus, etc. And then some interesting facts about his day there. The chalice that the Pope used at Mass was gifted to the Tommaso Villanova parish, but the Pope also received some gifts. And Caritas, the local Caritas, gave him a big basket filled with sweets and other goodies. And then there were some young men from the Don Bosco Oratory who offered him a soccer ball. And a sports center, and I posted the picture of this, gave him a really beautiful white baseball cap with his name, Leone XIV, 14th, and his motto embroidered on one side. And according to the man, journalist overheard him, according to the man who gave Leo the baseball cap, the Pope promised the boys from the oratory he'd play some basketball with them, but he said he would only play tennis when waters calmed down. Those are the Pope's words. So I thought that was kind of fun. Sometimes what's not in the official count on Vatican News, that's the best story of the day.
Right.
So, he has been busy and will be busy, as I said, Sunday Mass at Albano, not too far away, and then the Angelus, and then, of course, we'll see if he does go back Sunday or Tuesday to Rome. But an interesting thing, by the way, Sunday will be the fourth Mass that he has said on his vacation, because the Holy Father would say Mass every day anyway. So he went, his first Mass was on the 9th. That was the Mass for the Care for Creation, in which he wore vestments made by a firm from his native Chicago. And then July 13th, last Sunday, Mass in the parish. And then yesterday, Mass for the Carabinieri. There's a big, what's called the Jesuit Villa, the Villa Jesuita. And it has a beautiful chapel in it, and the Pope said Mass for the Carabinieri at the headquarters. And interestingly enough, people can make of this what they wish, but the altar was against the wall, so when the Pope was saying Mass, he did have his back to the faithful, And the Vatican posted a lot of pictures, but only one with his back to the faithful. So anybody wanting to know his consideration on the Latin Mass, etc., I think we're still going to, have to wait for that. But
I wanted to ask you about, and I think I mentioned this in an email. I just found out earlier this week, or was it? Yeah, it was Monday, I think, that they're not going to be handing out tickets for the canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati in September. Have you heard anything else? There's very little on the website about it, the Vatican website about it.
I can't believe you say that, because one of the first little notes I had to myself for you today, because last week 1 or 2 weeks ago, you asked me about tickets because you couldn't see anything online.
Yeah.
And they've now, on the Vatican site, vatican.va, if you go to tickets for papal events, they have added September to that, because September. They had July and August up, and, what events there are, how you would get tickets. And there is a form to request tickets, so I suppose I could write and ask one for myself and see what happens.
Because there was a story that came out from the dicastery, apparently for the Causes of the Saints, that said they're not going to be distributing tickets. And there was a notice that I saw, that said no tickets are going to be, which to me makes absolutely no sense. So maybe it's changed since then. And that's why I wanted to check with you, because if you think about it, Joan, that's going to be, even though there'll be fewer Americans, I think, because the dates were changed and many were coming over in April for the canonization of Carlo Acutis, but I can't imagine going to something like that without having, it's still free, but they do the tickets for crowd control to get an idea of how many people are going to be there.
Well, yeah.
And so you can kind of plan ahead, but it's like, how would they handle that if there were no tickets being distributed?
Is it going to be 300,000 or 30,000 because people don't know what to do? Oh, I'll definitely check on that. I'll go to the whole site and call a couple of contacts at the, at the congregation, at the dicastery. So, and by the way, one of the two, of course, to be canonized is Pier Giorgio Frassati. His coffin is being displayed in Rome's Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva until August 4th.
Yeah, I heard that. That is phenomenal. Yeah. Wow.
So, interesting times ahead, obviously, and, the Pope will, when he does go back to Rome, the first general audience will only be at the end of the month on the 30th. Mm-hmm. But, he'll probably he still has had a couple of audiences with different people here, and after Mass yesterday, he went nearby to visit, or was it Sunday? He went nearby to visit some sisters, some nuns. So he is staying busy, but according to Father Moral of the Augustinians, the Pope is trying to write an encyclical. He doesn't have, the superior of the order doesn't have any idea what it's about. He said, just knowing Leo, he said, a couple of themes that would come to my mind are Augustinian themes, unity, community. And, the Holy Father doesn't open his mouth that he mentions Jesus, no matter who he's talking to, little kids, teens, etc. He's always mentioning Jesus as being at the center of his life, and he asks youth to consider, a vocation, to consider dedicating their lives to following Jesus in the religious life. So you will find him speaking of Jesus no matter what the encyclical is about. So, but he sounds like a man, according to the Superior General of the Augustinians. Pope Leo sounds like a man who doesn't need that much rest. That he will.
No, I've noticed that, and also I loved what he said. He was so excited to be with the Carabinieri, and I love that because my great-grandfather was a part of that police force back in the day. I have a picture of him with the whole uniform, with the hat, with the plume and everything, so I always love to see the Carabinieri. Whenever I go to Italy, I have such respect for them. It just reminds me of the stories I heard about my great-grandfather in southern Italy. But I just thought that was so neat, where he addressed them and encouraged them to stay strong and to enforce the law and lovingly. It was just really, he's been doing a lot, even though I know it's a break, but it doesn't seem like much of a vacation. He's like working so hard.
But in a way, it's like he's brought back so much life and hope as Castor Gandolfo. And for the people, when he leaves, he'll be back in August, and then we don't know when he'll be back again. It would be lovely to think that after maybe a long trip, he might come for a weekend just to decompress and, but still, I mean, the joy that was on the face of the people. They were lining balconies. They were standing on rooftops, for last Sunday's Mass.
Yeah.
So,
regardless, I mean, I know obviously he's the Pope, so he's going to be busy, but I was talking about that in my Shrines and Wonders segment before you came on, that when you get to a place like a Castle Gandolfo, or I was talking about the Civita because of the connection between St. Bonaventure and his feast day yesterday, or you go to one of those smaller places that are outside the big city, you can't help but have a different feeling of relaxation.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what was fun was that as
hold that thought. We'll have to pick it up next week, my dear. We're out of time. Great discussion. Joan's Rome. Here, Joan Lewis every Wednesday on Catholic Connection. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to EWTN and Catholic Connection, an EWTN production, of course, Monday through Friday. Next hour on EWTN's Radio Extra, we are going to take a look at the beautiful first reading today, all about Moses. Moses like, you want me to do what? Who, me? I don't think so. God says, oh yes, you. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. We shall discuss in 2 cents. And then I'm so excited. I get excited every day because I love what I do, but I love it when we have people that I know on that I've talked to before. Father Gerald Murray is going to be with us. You know him, of course, from his great work at EWTN and the Archdiocese of New York, and, of course, his work with Raimundo, as I call him, Raymond Arroyo, on, of course, the world over. And I'm just so excited because I found this article a couple weeks ago, and it was all about the lack of discipline in Protestant churches and how pastors are concerned about that. And they talked about the need for confession. Now, obviously, they're not talking about the sacrament of reconciliation because they don't have that in the Protestant churches, but the article lends itself to great affirmation for the power of the sacraments. And there is, I think, deep in their hearts, the Holy Spirit working. And maybe my hope is that they will look at the Catholic Church more closely and look at us differently because of the need for confession. And they're recognizing that, you know what? Confession, they said, is not only good for the person, but good for the church. It's good for the community and for the world. Because when we are living according to the will of God, the fallout is always going to be positive. Talk to you soon. More Catholic Connection coming your way.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Wednesday morning. It's July 16th, 2025. Thank you for tuning into the second hour of Catholic Connection on a Wednesday here on EWTN's Radio Extra channel. Great to be with you. We have a wonderful lineup for you this morning. I'm very excited about having another conversation with the amazing Father Gerald Murray. If you recall, if you're a regular listener to this program, a few weeks ago I came across an article, I think it was on the Christian Post or Christianity Today, I can't remember, but it was a interesting survey that was done of Protestant pastors talking about the need to get back to the basics of discipline and getting people to confess their wrongdoing. And I'm thinking, wow. This reminded me of another story that came out a few months ago. I think it was right after Easter, where Christians, and these were non-Catholic Christians, saying that churches need to look like churches. Churches need to be churchy. And so I just found that these types of articles very interesting to me, that at some point, our brothers and sisters who are outside the church are seeing, and maybe it's the Holy Spirit, I think it's the Holy Spirit, obviously, but you know what I'm saying, that they're looking at this and they're thinking, and I don't know if the Catholicism thing is ringing in their heads, but it certainly lends itself to encouraging them to think about the faith and why we do things. But the whole idea of this article we're going to discuss with Father Murray is why we need to really embrace the gifts of the Catholic Church, especially with the sacraments and the power of the sacrament of reconciliation. And toward the end of the article, I shared it with you in a 2 cent segment several weeks ago, if you recall, the pastors are saying we need to get back to confession. Now, again, obviously they don't have the sacrament of reconciliation, but they're talking about speaking with people who are not living their lives well and according to biblical teachings, biblical principles, and that people need to confess that and be able to move on and confess it to the pastor or maybe someone at the church, an associate pastor, someone who works with people and helps them move beyond a sinful lifestyle. But why is that necessary? And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's a great opportunity to evangelize and to show these different discussions in the Protestant world as to why the Catholic Church is the one true church and the beauty that we have in these sacraments and why we do what we do and the importance of it. So we'll discuss with Father Murray. And then in 2 cents, I want to take a look at the beautiful first reading today, all about Moses going to check out the burning bush and the voice of God saying to him, take off your shoes, you're standing on holy ground. And then the Lord telling Moses, I'm going to have you save my people. I've heard their cry. And Moses is like, what? I don't think so. But oftentimes, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And how many of us have been in a situation where we've been asked to do something, we feel God calling us to do something, but we say no because we don't think we're good enough or qualified. So I think it's a good opportunity to reflect on that, and we shall discuss in 2 cents coming up after the break. First, the weather, though. Again, more rain coming to parts of the country, widespread thunder showers and thunderstorms, according to the National Weather Service. Some could be severe, may produce heavy downpours and flash flooding across much of the eastern and central U.S. Dangerous heat, they say, continuing in the Pacific Northwest and expanding across portions of the east. Deep tropical moisture and associated thunderstorms will bring heavy rainfall and localized flash flooding across portions of Florida into the central Gulf Coast. That's a look at the weather, and that is our rundown, as we say in the biz. Appreciate your listenership here on a Wednesday. We have a lot of news to get through. It is never a dull moment, always a lot going on, and we like to keep you connected, hence the name of the program, Catholic Connection. But let's get started at 4 minutes past the hour on Wednesday, July 16th, here on EWTN. Pope Leo XIV highlighting the urgency of coming together for peace and the importance of promoting unity through sports, politics, music, and more. In a video message published yesterday, the Holy Father addressing the participants in a charity match organized by the Holy See Children's Hospital Bambino Gesù and the Italian Caritas, he says, our humanity is at stake. Let this match that speaks of peace mark a point in its favor. Vatican News reporting in the message, the Holy Father also expressing his hope that all who take part in the event may look into the eyes of children and learn from them how to find the courage to welcome others, how to be men and women that promote encounter, and how to find the strength to believe and to ask that a truce may come, a time to stop the build-up to hatred. It is still possible, it's always possible, he said, to come together, even in a time of divisions, falling bombs, and war. He said it's necessary to create the opportunities to do this, challenge divisions, and recognize, he added, the greatest challenge is to come together. A federal appeals court upholding West Virginia's near-total abortion ban. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling yesterday the state's Unborn Child Protection Act can remain in effect. The case focused on whether federal regulations for the abortion drug mifepristone override state law. Republican Governor Patrick Morrisey praising that decision, calling it a big win for the state's pro-life efforts. Mark Mayfield tells us President Trump says he's not done with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The president told the BBC he's disappointed, but left the door open for talks after he threatened Moscow with sanctions over its war with Ukraine. Trump's remarks also follow his announcement of a deal with NATO to send more weapons, including Patriot missile systems, to Ukraine. Russia has continued its military strikes in recent weeks, prompting Trump to increase his public criticism of the Kremlin. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, the president saying the U.S. is destined to be the world's #1 superpower in artificial intelligence. He spoke at the inaugural Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit yesterday.
This is a really triumphant day for the people of the Commonwealth and for the United States of America.
The event bringing together some of the top leaders and investors in energy and AI. The president announcing $90 billion worth of private investments in AI and energy in Pennsylvania. He said the state is retaking its place in the forefront of energy. And Tammy Trujillo tells us President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency-related spending cuts bill has cleared a hurdle in the Senate.
Vice President Vance on Tuesday night broke a tie to allow the Senate to begin debate on the bill, which is attempting to take back spending that's already been approved. The House approved the billions of dollars in cuts by a narrow vote in June. The over $9 billion in reductions targets mostly foreign aid, but also funding for public broadcasting. Senators expect a marathon voting session on potential changes to the bill in the next few days, as leaders hope to pass it ahead of Friday's deadline. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Jewish organizations in Northern California raising concerns about attacks on people simply because they're Jewish.
These aren't just isolated events. They're part of a wave of intimidation that's left people scared to walk down the street wearing a Star of David or to host a public event. And many of these acts are tied, sometimes explicitly, to global events.
Julia Mates with the Jewish Community Relations Council referencing the war between Israel and Hamas. Mates says anti-Semitic incidents are driving important discussions about the safety of the Jewish community. Last year, the Anti-Defamation League reported a record of over 9,300 anti-Semitic incidents nationwide, with California seeing over 1,300. And a new poll shows a New York City mayor's race is very tight. The Harris X survey showing Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani getting 26% support, with independent candidate, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, 23%. Republican candidate Curtis Lewa getting 22%, and Mayor Eric Adams coming in a distant fourth at 13%. In a hypothetical one-on-one contest, a poll showing Cuomo beating Mamdani by 15 points. That poll was conducted last week prior to Cuomo announcing he'll be campaigning as an independent after his loss in the Democratic primary. And the president, meanwhile, continues to weigh in on the New York race. Trump says he thinks former Governor Cuomo does have a good shot at beating the Democratic nominee. His comments again come right after Cuomo this week announcing he is campaigning, but he's running as an independent. California lawmakers in the Assembly Public Safety Committee are voting on a measure that would ban officers from covering their faces during enforcement operations. California State Assemblyman Juan Alanis is not a fan of the measure.
Turning our trusted law enforcement agencies into criminals just for wearing a mask or covering themselves to protect their families and themselves is not the answer. And so I will not be supporting this, and I apologize.
The bill, introduced amid clashes over immigration raids in Los Angeles, applies to all law enforcement with the exceptions of undercover work, SWAT, and protection from smoke or gas. The vote, though, is currently on call to allow more deliberation. In Colorado, in Arizona, the Drago Bravo fire at the Grand Canyon is spreading. It's now burned more than 8,500 acres with 0% containment and has now destroyed the historic Grand Canyon Lodge. A combination of hot temperatures, low humidity, and strong winds making it very tough for fire crews there. The north rim of the Grand Canyon National Park will remain closed for the rest of the year or the 2025 season due to the fire. The senators in the area, Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego of Arizona, asking the federal government for answers concerning the spread of the fire. Authorities in California taking 21 children from a couple. This woman in Texas says she carried and gave birth to a child for that couple.
The FBI, me and some of the other girls that I'm talking to are currently working with them. I completed like a 3-hour interview with them a couple weeks ago.
On Tuesday, the Arcadia Police Department confirming the children, all born via surrogate mothers, were placed in protective custody. Investigators say this is connected with a child abuse case involving a 2-month-old baby with a traumatic head injury. A man and a woman who live in the home with the children were arrested for felony child endangerment, but have since been released. Police say the suspects were the kids' legal guardians. Investigators are also looking for a nanny, who is the main suspect in the child abuse case. And Scott Pringle tells us out on the East Coast, many residents are still cleaning out in parts of New Jersey and Westchester County from severe flooding.
Many basements and first floors got water from the flooding, and roads have been left caked in mud and have stranded vehicles. In North Plainfield, this guy was there when a house exploded Monday night.
The house just jumped up. Everything the roof flew off.
Authorities say 2 women died when their vehicle got swept away and into a brook in Plainfield. Some places in Middlesex, Union, and Somerset counties got 5 to 6 inches of rain. Meanwhile, a flash flood watch in effect late this afternoon for parts of central and northern New Jersey. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
A House hearing on the future of weather forecasting kicking off today, with tensions likely to rise over the recent deadly flash flooding in Texas. Well, the session is supposed to focus on how new technology can improve forecasts and save lives. Some Democrats are questioning whether cuts to the National Weather Service may have weakened early warning systems, even though the White House has confirmed that the Weather Service station in that area was fully staffed and even had extra personnel on hand. The Texas state climatologist is among those scheduled to testify. And several people recovering after an apparent stampede onto an escalator following a Beyonce concert at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta Monday night. Devon Ramsey says he was on a platform at a station when he heard someone screaming, causing people to rush an escalator nearby that suddenly sped up and then stopped.
There was a lady laying on the ground with her young daughter, an older lady that had the proper leg up on the bench. There were a lot of people that needed assistance after that.
8 of the injured were taken to the hospital, many of whom had cuts and scrapes. One was treated for a broken ankle. It's believed a person who screamed apparently set off the frenzy after being startled by an insect. The escalator's manufacturer says a cause of the incident is unclear and that it's assisting in the investigation. And a tropical disturbance moving across the Florida Panhandle has a moderate chance of becoming a tropical storm. If it does, Tropical Storm Dexter would likely be a low-end system. It depends on how much time the disturbance stays over warm water. Either way, heavy rains are a potential threat along the northern Gulf Coast from tonight and through the weekend. Coming up, sometimes do you feel that God is calling you to do something for which you're not qualified, and so you say, "Nah, Lord, nah, you can't want me." But he does, and he will qualify when he calls you. We'll explain in 2 Cents up next. Hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday, middle of summer. I love summer. It goes by way too quickly. I already saw yesterday, can you believe it? Back to school commercials. We just celebrated 4th of July, for crying out loud. And then my friend last week, Chuck Gatica, before we came home, Chuck was on talking about the situation in Texas and climate and all that stuff because he's an experienced meteorologist. During the break, he was telling me, Halloween stuff is already out in Michigan. Stop! Slow down. Dolce far niente. Anyhow, beautiful first reading today that is such a way to really examine our hearts. Are we being open to God's call in our lives? Or do we think that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, God can't possibly be calling me to do something for him? All right, so let's take a look at this reading. This is from Exodus, okay? Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock across the desert, he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in fire, flaming out of a bush. As he looked on, he was surprised to see that bush, though on fire, was not consumed. So Moses decided, I must go over to look at this remarkable sight and see why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw him coming over to look at it more closely, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. He answered, Here I am. God said, Come no nearer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your father, he continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. The cry of the children of Israel has reached me, and I have truly noted that the Egyptians are oppressing them. Come now, I will send you to Pharaoh to lead my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? He answered, I will be with you, and this shall be your proof that it is I who have sent you. When you bring my people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain. Wow. Imagine that. So if you know the history of Moses, right, in terms of him being raised by an Egyptian, and also, of course, trying to defend a Jew who was being beaten by an Egyptian, and eventually kills the Egyptian who is attacking the Jew, and he runs away. And God is still choosing him. Just as God chose David, who was an adulterer and a murderer. And in Scripture we see God calling David, of course after he is remorseful, a man after my own heart. How many times, maybe because of our own insecurities or past sin, that we doubt that God is calling us to do something? And we forget the words from Exodus chapter 3:12 that we just heard, I will be with you. Or the Great Commission, and know that I am with you until the ends of the ages, as the Lord tells us, right? As Jesus tells us. Go and preach the gospel north, south, east, and west, and know that I will be with you. The same message throughout Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament. Let me share with you before some comments from yours truly this beautiful reflection from Word Among Us, WAU.org. It starts out with that scripture verse from Exodus, I will be with you. Put yourself in Moses' sandals for a moment. Surely he had tended the sheep through all kinds of weather, over different terrains, and during various times and seasons. He knew the natural order of things, and in that natural order a bush that is on fire will eventually burn out. Imagine his surprise when he came upon a burning bush that was not burning up. Then imagine how much more surprised he must have been when he heard the very voice of God speaking from the midst of this bush. It would be easy for us, as it was for Moses, to be in awe of this scene. If the story ended here, we would have more than enough evidence that God is a worker of miracles. But what God does next is even more miraculous. And again, you can find this on the wonderful devotional website from Word Among Us, WAU.org. Just as God revealed his presence and power through the burning bush, he promised that he would manifest his power even more so through Moses. He would use this man to deliver his message of liberation to the Israelite people who were slaves in Egypt, and to the mighty Pharaoh himself. And if Pharaoh refused to let the people go, then the power of God would burn in and through Moses to change his mind. Moses himself will become a kind of burning bush, yet not consumed bush. Moses was hesitant at first, very insecure about his ability to speak publicly, and he protested that God must have chosen the wrong man. Isn't that funny how we doubt God? God speaks to us and then we say, hey, you're wrong. I mean, know you're God and everything, but you can't be thinking this. But God promised to be with him and to work through him. Eventually, Moses said yes, and the God of the universe, who can do anything he wants, began to work through this hesitant, fugitive shepherd. Surely, the meditation goes on, our God is a worker of miracles. Not only does he have power over the created universe, but he also has a power to work in our hearts. It is one thing to set a bush on fire without destroying it, but it is another thing, and I love this, altogether, to set a heart on fire with unyielding confidence in an unseen God. But that's exactly what the Lord did. What would it look like for your heart to be set on fire? Greater joy, confidence in hard situations, perhaps an eagerness to share the good news? The possibilities are endless. And these meditations on Word Among Us always close with a prayer, Lord, come and set my heart on fire with love for you. And I think there's so many lessons, not only in this reflection and meditation, but also in the first reading. Do we allow our hearts to be set on fire? Or do we put God in a little bit of a box and say, well, if I just do this and keep my emotions intact and don't get too excited about things and just live a good life, don't commit any mortal sins or anything, make sure I'm receiving the sacraments and going to Mass, everything will be fine. Well, okay. You're trying in some sense to do the right thing, and that's good. But for many of us, there comes a point in our life where God does ask us to take a leap of faith. And we hold back, and I'm speaking from personal experience. We don't think we're good enough, or perhaps it's a combination of not thinking we're good enough, but also thinking that if I let go of what I have now, this particular way of life, maybe a particular job, I'm not sure what's going to happen on the other side. So we doubt ourselves, and we doubt that God is talking to us. Not that we doubt that God is God, but we think, well, I must misunderstanding what God is trying to tell me. Or maybe we say, well, surely God is making a mistake. He means another person. And it's a process of discernment. And all you need to do is to keep moving toward God. Take a step, one step after the other. I love one of my favorite quotes from Mother Angelica, our foundress at EWTN. Faith is 1 foot in the air, 1 foot on the ground, and a queasy feeling in the stomach. Certainly, God is not going to ask you to let go of all your responsibilities. And this is where the clarity will come in. If you have a family, if you have responsibilities, it's not going to be of God if he's going to tell you to abandon your family. That's not going to happen. I've actually had people tell me things like that. Well, I'm just going to walk away and eventually. No. If you are, your marriage, your family, relationship with God, your family commitment is huge. But God may be calling you to something different in your life. Maybe it's an entirely new vocation. Maybe it's just something a little bit less daunting, such as maybe leading a Bible study or volunteering at an abortion as an abortion counselor on the sidewalks or volunteering at a pregnancy resource center, and maybe you don't feel qualified. But as we said at the top of the hour, God is famous for not calling the qualified, but qualifying the called. Okay? Now, there are people, right, in history and in the church that are perfect for the positions for which they've been chosen. Let's look at Pope Leo, right? But for many of us, he calls us to something that we don't really expect to do. And then he qualifies us in that process. As long as we have a heart on fire with love for him and we say yes, with that 1 foot in the air, 1 foot on the ground, and even, yes, that queasy feeling in the stomach. Let your heart be on fire for the Lord. He won't disappoint. So excited to chat again with our good friend, Father Gerald Murray. Of course, you know him well from the great work he does, not only here at EWTN with Raymond Arroyo and the world over, but his books, his articles. You can find a lot of his great work on The Catholic Thing, thecatholicthing.org. He's a canon lawyer, pastor of St. Joe's in New York City, and has a new book with Diane Montagna, who's a wonderful Catholic journalist, Calming the Storms, Navigating the Crisis Facing the Catholic Church and Society. Father, great to catch up with you. And how are things? It was great seeing you in Rome. What a beautiful time that was.
No, that was great, Teresa. I mean, what a time for the church, and it was great to be with you there and now welcome our new Pope. And yeah, it was just wonderful.
So before we get into our discussion this morning on this interesting article and discussions being held in the Protestant churches, how are you looking now at you're optimistic about the church and this papacy? What are your thoughts?
Yes, no, I mean, Pope Leo has said many wonderful things. Some of his sermons, talks, he gave a beautiful talk to parliamentarians who came to Rome for the Jubilee year, and he talked about the natural law, which was beautiful. He addresses the seminarians and priests in Rome last month were really beautiful, encouraging serious spiritual life. He's given, his first act as Pope was to go to Genezzano, which is that beautiful shrine of Our Lady of Good Counsel, run by the Augustinian order. And I've been to that shrine myself. It's a magnificent, beautiful shrine to Our Lady, and that was what he wanted to do. So he's by word and example, he's inspiring us to be faithful to Christ, and that's just wonderful.
No. And I think in light of what we're going to be discussing this morning, this article that I came across on one of the Christian websites, I thought it was so interesting. The Christian Post, church discipline no longer practiced in most Protestant churches. I'm wondering if Pope Leo, being, of course, the first American Pope, do you think more people outside the Catholic Church, other Christians, are looking toward him and maybe thinking differently or opening their hearts and minds to the church? What do you think?
I think that will be an effect certainly in the United States. And then the whole world is fascinated by the U.S. because we're the superpower and the economic engine and kind of the model of developing economy. We're also a country that does still value large section of the citizenry true morality. The anti-abortion movement in the United States is still very influential. So there are many, many good signs that people will pay attention throughout the world. And I'm looking forward, Teresa, when Pope Leo comes to the United States, which I'm pretty sure he's going to do, maybe not in 2025, but hopefully in 2026. That's going to be an incredible moment because, we'll be welcoming American Pope in America. So, there's a lot of good things coming from this pontificate.
I was joking on set with Dr. Bunson and the other team, Monsi Alvarado and Father Monsignor Landry, that I wonder if the Pope will come to the March for Life. Because why not? You never know. You never know, right?
Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to come to New York because all the popes visit the UN as one of their first foreign trips. So I think that's going to happen. And I can't imagine that he won't go down to Philly to visit his alma mater, Villanova.
Yeah.
He'll certainly go to Chicago. Washington's a natural. Let's see where else he picked. He probably needs to do at least a 10-day trip to the U.S. So, I hope the planners are listening to this interview.
Yes,
because
exactly,
we want to see the Pope over here.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's talk about the article I sent you, Father, because I think it's so important. Church discipline no longer practiced in most Protestant churches. It was a very interesting survey, and it was just posted recently. While most U.S. Protestant churches have policies in place to address significant misbehavior by members, formalized church discipline is rarely practiced, according to new release data from Lifeway Research. The survey conducted among over 1,000 Protestant pastors between August and September of last year found that 1 in 6 pastors reported their church had disciplined a member in the past year. The infrequency of church discipline is not because church members aren't sinning, said Scott McConnell, executive director of Lifeway Research. Church discipline typically occurs when a member is not repentant for a sin or is no longer qualified for a role because of sin. More than half of pastors reported their churches have not formally disciplined a member during their tenure, nor are they aware of any previous instances. Now, I found this article very eye-opening and very interesting, that these Protestant pastors are recognizing the need for people to be disciplined, and also toward the end of the article, the importance of confession, not in the form that we would view it, but this whole idea of confession. Don't you find that very interesting, Father?
I did find that interesting. I really wasn't familiar with this whole practice in Protestant churches of disciplining members. I guess, the equivalent would be, kind of fraternal correction done publicly. That a member who is leading some ministry or some interesting and an important group in the parish then becomes known that they've done something bad, that they're disciplined. But of course, then the whole discussion comes down to what is considered, sinful in the different denominations. Because in some denominations, behavior that the Catholic Church would say is sinful is celebrated, and in others, we don't believe in divorce and remarriage in the Catholic Church, but Protestant churches don't share that belief, many of them. So, what happens if somebody gets divorced and remarried? Would they be in charge of an apostolate or a ministry? So in the Catholic Church, it varies because we have canon law and we have, bishops who exercise supervision over the priest and the faithful in his diocese. So if there is someone who qualifies sadly to be called a public sinner, whose violation of God's law is known and is manifest, and it's definitely, you can impute it to him. It's not just a suspicion. Well, then, canon law has provisions to discipline those people and to remind them and call them to repentance. So it's interesting. A hierarchical church has one way of doing it. In a Protestant church, it would depend exactly what the structures are.
Right. I want to close before we take a break with 2 paragraphs that we can pick up on, Father, after the break. The article says, for far too long, American churches have strayed away from practicing church discipline, and the product of that has been sexual assault allegations, greed, heresy from the pulpit, normalization of divorce and premarital sex, cowardice when it comes to confronting sin in our culture, biblical illiteracy, and more. Christian conservative activist and influencer Reagan Scott wrote in an op-ed piece for the Christian Post back in 2022, because a little leaven has been allowed within these churches, the whole lump has been leavened, and illegitimate children of God have maintained fellowship with true Christ followers, tainting the purity of the church. The purpose of discipline, according to this study, is repentance and restoration. You mentioned this earlier, Father. Around 83% of pastors said their churches aim to lovingly and biblically confront unconfessed sin, with 51% strongly agreeing. Evangelical pastors, 89% of them more likely than mainline pastors, 74%, to affirm this approach. And Baptist, 90% pastors showing the strongest agreement. When we come back, Father, I want to talk about this one of the last lines in the article. I thought this was very telling. And this reminds us, of course, of the sacrament of reconciliation. Confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the local church and the individual. Now, to me, that is such a Catholic line, because we know when we go to our priests, and we go to you or another priest, you're in persona Christi, and what that does for our psyche, our soul, and those around us, it has a positive fallout. More on this with Father Gerald Murray on a Wednesday. Stay tuned. Always great to catch up with Father Gerald E. Murray, canon lawyer, pastor of beautiful church in New York, St. Joseph's, Giuseppe. His new book, Calming the Storm, Navigating the Crisis Facing the Catholic Church and Society, now available, and you can find his great work in a number of places, including the Catholic Thing, catholicthing.org, and of course, always joining Raymond Arroyo on the wonderful program The World Over. So, Father, I love articles like this because for me, I always try to connect the dots. And I love the church so much. And the church teachings brought me and my husband back into a relationship with Christ, saved our marriage, and was the reason that he became a deacon, studied for the diaconate, and the reason I got into Catholic radio, because I really, growing up, even though I had a good Catholic education, once I graduated from grade school and went off to a public high school and a public university, not that I didn't believe in God, but I really didn't take the time to build on what I had learned. And I did have really good educators. I had both good lay teachers and solid nuns and priests that taught us well at our parish. But, the world comes in and you get busy and you just kind of slowly drift away, which is what happened. But the church teachings and the structure of the church and what we have in the church, if we look around and if we have eyes to see and ears to hear, we can see the beauty of it. And you know this, of course, as a canon lawyer especially, that the church is a church and that God gave us this church for a specific reason. Not that we're perfect, the people are not perfect. Many of us, of course, all of us are fallen. It's the nature of man. But the church herself gives us this beauty and this structure. And I think this article just highlights that. And this is what I got from this article, especially this last line: confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the local church and the individual. I would take it even further, as I said going into the break, Father, that it's not just for the benefit of us and the individual and our church, but it affects the entire world. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, no, it's a great line because it expresses an inescapable truth, which is our conscience, accuses us when we've done something wrong. And the more, attuned we are to the Word of God, then the sharper that rebuke will be. So the question is, how do you calm your conscience and not just deaden it? And it's calm by, admitting your sin and receiving God's forgiveness, which is the beauty of the sacrament of penance. And that so much good is done as a result of that. And it does affect the whole world. In places where confession is appreciated and loved, society has a different kind of tone to it. So, yeah, and in the Protestant world, I'm glad to see that this writer is talking about that because, yes, it's not enough simply to say, well, that's between me and God. Therefore, I don't have to confess or I don't have to admit things. But the problem is sin has social effects, and that's what they're talking about in terms of church parishioners or members of a particular congregation, being rebuked and called to repentance precisely because what they've done is hurt other people.
Right. But if you don't have a structure, as you said earlier, then what is sin and who's sinning and who isn't sinning and what does it mean?
Yeah, no, that's actually the crucial thing is here. who's going to forgive me? How do I know that I'm forgiven? And what do I need to be forgiven of? And the Catholic Church provides clarity on all of those questions. Sin offends God first and then my neighbor. It also has negative consequences on me, of course, because it separates me from God. And who do we confess to? We confess to the priest in the sacrament of penance. And then, of course, the benefit is received because the grace that we receive through the sacrament of penance then motivates us, radiates out from us, and helps us, to draw others. And then the good example we give. It's always inspiring if you go to a parish church and you see a long line of people waiting at the confession box. May not be happy for those people that got to wait, right. But it's a sign that that's a lively parish with devoted parishioners. So, yeah, there's always good things come when we admit our sin and humbly seek God's pardon. Of course, the question is, what is sin and what do we need to confess? And that, again, the Church gives clarity. In the Protestant world, sad to say, you can have a congregation on First Avenue that says, this is wrong, and then you go to Second Avenue, and they'll say, no, this is right. Who do we go to for authentic interpretation of the Scriptures?
Don't you think an article like this, and this is also what I took from it, this is a great way to evangelize in terms of talking to a non-Catholic about why the Church does what she does in the beautiful sacraments that we have?
I think so. I think that's a great insight because, precisely that the human heart wants to, make amends. If we're a loving person or try to be a decent, loving person, then, justifying our sins for the rest of our lives, that's an undue burden and it brings a lot of unhappiness. So, but then the question is, how do I get out of that? And, confessing or making known. And, this is an important thing. And of course, we have to have the attitude that we're willing to forgive other people because, it's a common thing that happens in life. We yell at somebody or somebody yells at us, and then what do we do about it? Well, the person who's at fault needs to go be a man or a woman and say, look, I'm sorry I did that. I had a mistaken reason for doing it, and I don't want to do that again. And that restores harmony on at least a psychological and friendly level, but it's also a sign that God's grace is at work in the life of that person.
I've interviewed many wonderful Catholic psychologists, such as our own Dr. Ray Guarendi, who talk about something. I'm sure you remember that short story. I read it in grade school by Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart, of how the man who killed the older man and then put his heart under the floorboards and he thought the heart was beating. That was his telltale heart, not just the heart that was beating, but the man's own heart, the murderer's own heart, because he was just felt so guilty about what he did. Several years ago, a friend of mine who runs a beautiful ministry in which I'm involved, it's called WINE, Women in the New Evangelization, Kelly Walquist, they did a women's conference on why we need Maury Povich, and it was about confession. And I love that title. I keep going back to it because you see all these talk shows, right? And people are telling all kinds of things on national television, but there's a reason for that because they need to, to get it off their chest. There's a psychological reason for it.
Sure. And, why do people watch Judge Judy?
Right.
Because they're waiting for the judge to convince the criminal to admit they've done something wrong. We're all kind of haunted by the idea of, when I do something bad's going to happen to me. And then we have to say, well, that's not the end of the story. If you recognize your sin and your fault and seek pardon and make reparation, then you can gain strength to avoid that in the future. But It all begins with that humiliating experience of saying, guess what? I'm not 100% right all the time.
Mm-hmm. And what I love about the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church is always saying, come and see. It's not hitting people over the head with the Bible and the Catechism. If you want to be in the church, there are of course, our teachings and the rules. But this is up to you. It is between you and God in saying yes. But we always remind people, and my pastor is always doing this, about the sacrament of reconciliation, to not be afraid. And even in our church, we have, whenever you go to confession, they have the act of contrition printed out. They give you a little guideline, and they say, don't be nervous, just come. And I think we need to remind people of that.
No, that's beautiful. And exactly, when you do overcome either fear or kind of like, well, I haven't done this in a long time, I don't know if I need to, just step back and say, these are all excuses. let me go to the confession box in my church, a reconciliation room, and let me, be honest before God and God's representative. And it produces peace of soul. It produces an accountability that is not just theoretical. No, I'm not just saying maybe I did do something wrong that hurt people. No, you say I did something wrong and I know I hurt people and I offended God. Now I want to start again.
Don't you think, too, as not only a canon lawyer, but as a wonderful priest, and I'm sure confession is I know many priests with whom I speak say it's such a gift to be able to see people transformed in the confessional. But don't you think, too, that when we go to confession, even if we're not aware of something, or maybe even if it's not a sin, but God just wants to talk to us and to calm us down or to assure us, because this has happened to me, that this is what happens when you come forward and you're willing to go to confession, that God's going to speak to you in different ways through the priest in persona Christi.
No, it's very true. By opening up your heart to God in front of his representative, many graces are received. And, the priest may or may not give you some advice. But the fact of the matter is you say, well, look, here I am, little old me, and, God put this priest in this parish and this confession box and, right here, and I took advantage of it. Now my life has been changed by a divine act because, of course, the forgiveness of sins, no man has the power to forgive sins, God alone, and he gives that power to the priest. And, yeah, it's, as a priest there in confessions, I'm grateful, I think, back before I got ordained to all the priests who heard my confessions, and they were, giving me guidance and encouragement. And, I remember different priests who, you get to know, and then you go to confession, and you say, well, what a good man. He's very patient, he's understanding, he holds to the moral law, but he realizes that God is, in his goodness, makes up for our defects by forgiving them. So many benefits and so much joy. And that's one of the great things I deal with converts to have over the years, and how many of them, they appreciate the fact that they know their sins are forgiven. They know it's not just me making a prayer, it's actually receiving a divine act in their life.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because if you look at what happened over this past Easter and how many thousands of people came into the church, in our own archdiocese here in southeastern Michigan, we had close to 2,000 converts. And if you look at England and you look at France, which are two very left-leaning countries, right, that have really openly discriminated against Christians, especially Catholics, again, thousands, Father, coming into the church. And if you read the reports, it is about the sacraments. It is about the tradition. It is about the Latin Mass, right?
Sure. Oh, no, this is very encouraging. And, those reports were something that we were all talking about, different priests and friends of mine, because it's very encouraging. I mean, France, for instance, the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church, the Mass-going percentage is way down. It's below 10% of all Catholics going to church on Sunday. The vocation picture is very grim. There are dioceses not ordaining people, some for years. And then what do you see? All these young people, people in their 20s and 30s, showing up at the different parishes to be baptized. And, in addition, we have many converts from immigrants who come into Europe from, places that were either they were Muslims or they were non-believing pagans. And then they exposed, you mentioned the Latin Mass, the beauty of liturgy, the order, that we see in the life of the saints, the beauty of the cathedrals. I mean, when you see the new Notre Dame Cathedral, that's going to impress people. This is the house of God, and look how beautiful it is. So things of that sort are really signs of God's blessing.
Yeah, and I do think that these articles, and I love reading this because I know this is what I do as a reporter. I always try to connect the dots, and it keeps going back to the beauty and the structure of the church. It just keeps hitting me over the head all the time. I guess I need constant reminders because I'm Calabrese and I'm very thick-headed. But no, I mean, it is. I mean, the beautiful church, it's just incredible, the gift we have.
No, and, it's, if people from faraway places end up in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and they go inside and they look up and say, what in the world is this? People built this building for what purpose? And then the answer is, of course, well, because this is the house of God.
Amen.
And we want to be in a place that draws our eyesight up. So you build a tall building and people are in awe. And you say to yourself, this is nothing compared to heaven. But this is how we represent heaven on earth, by these beautiful buildings, and then just the whole order, the Gregorian music, beautiful liturgy, and then the sight of, nuns doing charitable work, missionaries preaching the gospel. All of these things, it all comes together.
Yep. As one priest said on a pilgrimage I did years ago, I love being Catholic, and I sure do. Father, great to talk to you, and look forward to seeing you, of course, on the world over. You're a blessing. Father Gerald Murray from New York, New York, as my mother would say. Stay tuned. Joy talking with Father Gerald Murray. Don't forget, of course, you can always see him on the amazing Raymond Reigns program, The World Over, on Thursday evenings here on EWTN. You don't want to miss tomorrow's show, I'm telling you, as Rosie would say. All right, so Father Mitch Pacwa for Cultural Connections. And then, so excited, the wonderful Dr. Matthew Bunson will be joining us, and we have a brand new pilgrimage that we are going to be announcing tomorrow. And we are going to be walking in the footprints of the popes. And we will be going, God willing, to Rome, south to Castel Gandolfo, north to Arezzo, also going to Orvieto for the Eucharistic miracle, going to the city of the popes, a medieval village in northern Lazio, about 90 minutes north of Rome, that many people miss. And they shouldn't, because it's very powerful, and it is the place of the first papal conclave. The one where they took off the roof because they were getting so frustrated because it was taking like 3 years. That is very much connected to Arezzo, and Matthew and I will talk about that tomorrow. We're also going to be taking you to the barracks of the Swiss Guard and a special passageway that is now open in Rome. We will discuss the details tomorrow. We have a special spiritual director, and we are just so excited to announce this pilgrimage, La Dolce Fide 2026, with yours truly, Deacon Dom, and Dr. Matthew Bunson from EWTN, who'll be with us tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday. Don't forget, il dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. Slow down, reflect, and relax. It's summertime. Talk to you tomorrow. A domani.